1/4 of all people will experience a mental health issue, and 1 in 15 people will have what is considered a severe, debilitating mental health issue. This is an incredibly high number, and there are many reasons behind this that, file into genetic, biological things, people having them just because of the way their bodies are structured and their minds are structured, but also there are societal features that cause these mental illnesses, or not so much cause, but increase the chances of someone susceptible to experience such a thing. And my main focus on this video is going to be that 1 in 15 severe, debilitating category. So what exactly is defined by a severe, debilitating mental illness? Debilitating usually means it gets in the way of copable living. So things that may involve hallucinations or delusions, such as schizophrenia, DID, those fall under that. But also it is the depression with suicidal tendencies, the extreme anxiety bordering on agoraphobia, where you cannot live life basically because you are trapped by an ailment in the mind basically. And also things that factor into these are the much more complex, confounding things, like people with God complexes or Messiah complexes, or people with locked-in syndrome, or people, I can't remember what it's called, but it is a mental illness where the person literally believes they are dead and their skin is decaying, and that is something that multiple people experience. It's not a phenomenon, it's a genuinely documented mental illness, and that's insane. We as a species are so susceptible to these mental illnesses, and we almost backtrack on them. Things like anxiety and panic disorder, there are defense mechanisms going into overdrive. They're things we need going into proportions much further than are necessary. Things like narcissism is our necessary ego exceeding necessity, becoming too strong for needing. Of course, we need some sort of ego to live confidently, but when we get a narcissistic ego, it's tenfold that, and it becomes unbearable. But all this stems from the brain and the brain stimuli, whether that be, the childhood home, the societal life, the genetic makeup of the person. But regardless of those factors, which are incredibly important in the development of a mental illness, it's the brain that really clicks it in. It takes these stimuli and these tricks and these motions within the life of the person and within the structure of the person and turns it into this mental illness almost as a coping ability. DID is a form of trauma coping. It's the person detaching and creating separate entities within themselves to free themselves from usually a childhood trauma. Depression is the avoidance of motivation so as to avoid almost a failure. Almost you start to believe that there is no hopeful future, so that when you yourself find yourself in a situation where hopeful future is missed out upon, you are almost have this defense up, but you're still damaged. Anxiety is the fear of the scary situations, so you keep yourself out of them. They are really coping mechanisms. And say, as I mentioned, a God complex, people want to save people, like Pikanishta. It's a part of the human condition, and it is a good thing if you can save someone, but when that becomes your entire dedication, and it comes to these God and Messiah complex levels, then it controls your life and debilitates it, because you can't live a copable life, because you are dedicated to that ideal which has come from all these separate stimuli running through your brain, which can't handle the exacts of the situation in a functioning way So it comes up with these delusions, these illustrations of irregularity, of abnormal working. So as to cope, we turn ourselves into something lesser than copeable to cope. We can't be exact human because we find that too tricky. The brain just fails under the pressure, so it throws a spanner into the works and gives itself some kind of thing that it finds helpful but the body finds damaging, just to get through almost. And yes, the person may feel like it's not getting through, especially if it's a suicidal tendency, debated depression. They're not going to feel like they're getting through, but that's how the brain is getting through beyond the conscious level. It really is a last defense against too much traumatic, too much stressful, too much overwhelming, too much bombarding stimulus. The brain turns itself into something other than functioning, to cope, to run, to keep itself alive. It becomes the predator and turns the being into the prey. It's almost like a game for it. Survival of the fittest. If the brain can keep itself clicking with these faults at the expense of the conscious being, the brain does that because it can't see the fault. The brain's not moral, it's the being that is. So that's how and why we get these so common mental illnesses. And you watching this, or at least someone you know or close to, will have sensed or felt such a thing. And that's why, because it is how our brain finds a way, basically.